Hello and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Cataclysm Patch 4.2 DPS guide. As always, this is Draven from the US Burning Legion server, and today we will be covering the Retribution Paladin. This will be a two-part guide, and in part 1 we will handle stats, spec, glyphs, macros, my UI, my add-ons, and some general Paladin Retribution gameplay. In part 2, we'll go ahead and cover over a more in-depth look at the actual combat portion of playing a Retribution Paladin. So, let's jump right in and take a look at our stats. As a Retribution Paladin, the most important stat above anything else is strength. Following strength is you get hit rating to the cap of 8%, which I believe is 961 rating. Following hit rating comes expertise, to where you get it to 26. So, any melee, you want to aim for 8% hit rating, 26 expertise. However you got to get that. Those are the top three. After strength, hit rating to the cap, expertise to the cap, comes mastery. Mastery is the big hitter for Retribution Paladins. It is a huge portion of our damage, and you should get it wherever possible once you've reached your caps. Following mastery is crit rating. It's a decent stat, but nowhere near mastery. And pulling up the rear is haste. You don't want haste. Just reforge it off. Do your best to itemize against haste. Don't take a piece of gear that has haste and crit or something like that. Just do your best to get mastery. And if you can't get mastery, go with crit. You don't want haste. That's reforging. Same thing, reforge for hit rating once you hit your cap. Start reforging for expertise once you've hit your cap, which should be quite easy. Start reforging everything you can for mastery. If you're not very handy with reforging, check out www.wowreforge.com. It is an amazing website that will help you optimize your gear and your reforging, and will do so very well. That's about it for stat. Right, let's go ahead and take a look at our talent trees. As always, I will basically be going over everything I did not take in opposition to the things I did take. So, Guardian's Favor, it's not often that I'm having to bot myself or use Hand of Freedom, so I didn't really see any need for this in a PvE environment. Selfless Healer, this is kind of controversial, but it's a DPS loss, in my opinion. I don't see this being any kind of a DPS gain. You could use those charges of holy power. Instead of casting a word of glory on somebody else, you can go ahead and use it for a Templar's Verdict, or put your Inquisition up. So for me, this is a useless talent. It might play decently in PvP. I don't PvP on this tune, I wouldn't know. But for PvE, raw DPS, it's not helpful. I didn't take it. Acts of Sacrifice. Again, reduces the cooldown and mana cost of, Hand of Freedom, Hand of Salvation, Hand of Sacrifice. The only one of those that I often find myself using is Hand of Salvation, simply for the threat drop. Past that, I don't use the Hand of Sacrifice very often. I never use it. I don't really use Hand of Freedom, so it's just not a useful talent in my opinion. Everything else I thought was worth taking, so I grabbed it. Into the protection tree, I took Seals of the Pure. Basically just for the buff to Seal of Truth and Seal of Righteousness, the two seals that we use most often. And going into the Holy Tree, I took Arbiter of the Light for the increased critical strike chance on Judgments and Templar's Verdict, as well as Judgments of the Pure for the increased melee haste. And lastly, Blazing Light for the increased damage to Exorcism. Let's take a look at my glyphs. My primes, I chose Exorcism, Seal of Truth, and Templar's Verdict, the only solid choices I believe that we have. For majors, I took Lay on Hands, because you never know when you have to be the guy throwing out a clutch Lay on Hands. It's pretty handy. Ascetic Crusader, and Hand of Salvation. For me, I like knowing that I can immediately cast Hand of Salvation and drop all my threat. So to me, that's a great glyph to use. However, you can also consider using a glyph of Hammer of Wrath to reduce the mana cost of Hammer of Wrath by 100% over Lay on Hands. If you got some solid healers and you don't find yourself in that situation where you need to clutch heal, go ahead. You could also take Glyph of Divine Protection over Glyph of Salvation if threat is not an issue for you and you want that increased magical resistance. Go ahead and take a Glyph of Divine Protection. And last but not least, for my minors, Glyph of Might, Glyph of the Kings, and Glyph of Truth. Let's go ahead and take a look at macros. As always, if you're familiar with my playstyle, you're familiar with the way I make my videos and the way I play my classes, I use a lot of Alt button modifier macros. What that means is, if I hold the Alt button, mostly my 1 through 5 abilities are going to change to something else. It simply lets me put more abilities within hand's reach, and the Alt button is the most comfortable modifier for me to use. Also, if you're familiar with my videos, you'll know that I have a 1 button cooldown macro for most of my characters. My Ret Pally is no different. My 1 button macro involves my Golden Blood Potion, Zealotry, Inquisition, Avenging Wrath, and Guardian of the Ancient Kings. However, since Guardian of the Ancient Kings is most beneficial after that initial 20 seconds to get the stacks, the increased strength stacks up, I do have another macro that is just my Golden Blood Potion and my Kings. What that is, I use that as a pre-pop macro, and I'll use it before going into combat. You could also easily manually, if it's a fight where you have to do a pretty considerable travel distance before getting to the boss, go ahead and just manually pre-pot and then hit Kings once you're there. There's nothing wrong with that. But for the sake of doing it on this dummy, I have a 1 button macro that does my potion and my Guardian of the Ancient Kings. And roughly 20 seconds into that Guardian of the Ancient Kings, basically whenever I get my first 3 stacks of Holy Power, I'm going to hit my other 1 button macro with my Zealotry one, and it's going to pop Zealotry, Inquisition, Avenging Wrath, and then from there I'll go through with my rotation, which I'll discuss later on. And for me, that's just how I found to optimize my burst DPS most efficiently. Past that, there's no tricky macros, there's no tricky keybinds, nothing like that. Everything else is basically just subject to playstyle. Make sure your main abilities, which are Judgment, Templar's Verdict, Crusader Strike, Divine Storm for AoE situations, Consecration, and Holy Wrath, as well as Exorcism. Make sure all of those are within hand's reach. You can quickly react to them because the Ret Paladins have a very, very proc-based and priority-based playstyle that you need to be able to react to very quickly in order to get the max amount of DPS from your character. So make sure all those are within hand's reach and you should be alright. Let's do a rundown of the add-ons I use, which for Ret Paladin is probably one of the most important things. Just my general add-ons for all my characters. Up top I have Titan Panel. It's simply a utility add-on. I like to have it. It gives me a lot of great options. I have Healbot up, even on my Ret spec. It's a quick way for me to lay on hands, or if I have to bop somebody, whatever it may be, I can quickly do that with a click of a button. This bar is Fort Exorcist. It's simply a cooldown tracker, mostly used for internal cooldowns on my trinkets and a few other things. My chat box is a chat box add-on called Pratt that lets me, do some cool things, press up, and check it out. I definitely appreciate that add-on. It lets you copy a link straight out of chat and copy other people's chat. It's cool. My bars are set up this way thanks to Bartender 4, and they have this golden outline, and these ones are circles due to button facade. Totally cosmetic. Don't have to have it to increase your DPS at all. My map has this art around it thanks to Sexy Map. It's also moved down here thanks to Sexy Map. It gives us an option to lock it and we can move it around. I have my heads up display, DHUD 3. Basically, it's just a quick way to get a general idea of my health and mana without looking down at the numbers. Omen right here, Recount, Skada. I like to run Skada and Recount at the same time. If I'm raiding, I have one set to healing, one set to DPS, and I can just track both of them at the same time for the raid. It's nifty. And Skada at times seems to pick stuff up that Recount does not. So I appreciate that. And most importantly, my CLC Ret timer. This add-on, basically, it has your priority programmed into it, and you can change it if needed. But what it'll do is, as you go into combat, it'll tell you exactly what abilities you need to hit to optimize your DPS. So Crusader Strike, Judgment, Holy Wrath. Now hold out for Crusader Strike again. And just as stuff changes, as you get procs, it'll tell you what to hit, when to hit it. It's an amazing add-on, and I would not even think about playing Ret DPS without it. Because we have such a proc-based and priority-based rotation. It is amazing. You can go ahead and give it default values that you want to set for mana cost on Consecration. If I have greater than 20k mana, use Consecration. If I don't use it. It's a very, very handy add-on, and I suggest you get it. Get familiar with it, get to using it, all that stuff. Next is my Power Auras. Power Auras are an amazing way to track your procs and your buffs. For me, I use 5 main ones. This one right here is simply to give me a really fast overview and look at how long my Consecration is up, or my Inquisition is up. And I can quickly glance over at it, see I have less than 10 seconds, so I know I have to reapply it soon. The very bottom one is a trinket proc for Race Against Death, Crushing Weight, is increased haste. It looks cool, and I'll put it there. This next one up is, I believe it is, yeah, Sword Guard Embroidery. It's the Tailoring back enchant. Chance to proc and increase your attack power by 1,000. Right in the middle, this is Landslide. And over here is Slayer, my trinket buff. License to Slay. And I have my timer as well as the stacks above it. So those are all my power auras. I can export them to the description if needed. Just go ahead and leave a comment asking for it. I find them very handy and very useful when you're raiding. I use them for basically every spec and every tune. That should just about be a generalization of everything for part 1. Before we wrap it up, we'll go ahead and cover a few things such as seals and auras for those who are really new to Paladins. We have 5 different auras: Devotion, Retribution, Resistance, Consecration, or Concentration, and Crusader aura. Which one you use is really up to your raid, depending on what you have. More often than not, you'll be using Devotion aura if you're the only Paladin. If you have a Shaman in the group, let him lay Stone Skin Totem, and you can use Resistance aura. Or if he's got the Glyph for Healing Stream Totem, your next best choice is probably Concentration aura. And then lastly, Retribution aura at the very end. Just ask your raid which one they prefer you to use, and I'm sure they tell you no problem. Looking at our seals, the 2 seals you need to know for PvE are Seal of Truth and Seal of Righteousness. Now, Seal of Truth is the one you're going to be using for single target. What it does is it puts a stacking debuff onto the target that increases our damage. It's definitely the one you want to use for single target. Also, if you're going for multi-target AoE, you're going to want Seal of Righteousness. Seal of Righteousness, coupled with Seal of Command, is going to really give you big AoE DPS. You're going to lay Consecration, hit Holy Wrath, Judgment on cooldown, and most importantly, Divine Storm on cooldown. That's what's going to get your numbers up there, and that's how you want to handle AoE situations. Think Beth Talak. Alright, that's it for part 1. I will see you guys in part 2, where we look at a more in-depth analysis of the rotation, as well as more information on the CLC Ret add-on, and an actual 5-minute DPS test by yours truly. I'll see you guys there. Peace.